A few summers back, I worked at a camp that was nearly 100 years old. The camp served adults and kids with varying levels of ability of all ages. It was really the highlight of many of the campers' lives. Campers and workers alike joked the place was haunted, but I had thought it was one of those funny camp legends to mess with the campers and share around the fire. As a camp leader, I had my own room in an old cabin, and I shared a bathroom with one other leader who lived on the other separate half of the cabin. One night I was up late dealing a camper having a meltdown. Around midnight, I had finally gotten her to sleep, and I was trekking back to my own cabin when thunder roared loudly. I sprinted the rest of the way, and as soon as I hit the door, it started pouring. I realized at this moment that I still had my walkie-talkie on me. Usually we charge them in the main office at night, but I decided to not run into the storm, so I turned the walkie-talkie off and set it on my dresser. Shortly after that, I went to bed. I awoke at around 3 a.m. to what felt like someone poking my leg. I opened my eyes and looked down at my leg under the sheet where I had felt the poke and saw nothing. I tried to go back to sleep, but a few seconds later I felt it more aggressively and on a larger scale, as if a whole hand had wrapped around my calf, and I sat up in fear. As I sat up, my walkie-talkie across the room lit up and beeped, something that could only happen if someone physically turned the side dial and pressed a button. The walkie-talkie stayed on and I was paralyzed in fear. Eventually I got up and turned it back off and turned on the room's lights. I checked and no one was in my room or under my bed or in my closet. There were no objects that could have caused the poking. To this day, it still makes me feel tight-chested thinking about it. I used to camp in the backyard with my little sister whenever our parents fought. They didn't fight much, but when they did it was World War III, and we were refugees. I'd set up the tent while Mom and Dad shouted in the kitchen. I'd start a fire in our fire pit, and the argument inside would bolster. All the while, Maggie sat on the fence and watched me set up camp. As dark as those days were, I always had fun camping with Maggie. We always played Monopoly. I let her be the car, and she showed me mercy every time I landed on the boardwalk. Whenever we camped, we'd pick back up where we left off. No one ever won. Sometimes we sat by the fire and made up scary stories, but we always gave them cheerful endings. The monster in the closet was just a jacket. The girl wasn't missing, she just went to the park. The trail of blood was just a horrific catch-up accident. One summer night, I was setting up camp again. Maggie sat on the fence, eating a popsicle, and Mom screamed at Dad inside. The fire was taking some time to get started. When I finally got it going, I said, "Let there be light." Then I looked up, expecting to see a smile on Maggie's face, but I didn't see her at all. She didn't fall behind the fence. She didn't go inside with Mom and Dad. She wasn't at a friend's house. She wasn't at the park. She wasn't anywhere. I'd gone to the park every day after that night. When school started back up, every day became once a week. When I went off to college, once a week became once a month. It's been 10 years since Maggie disappeared, and I still wonder if the screams I heard that day weren't Mom's. I was so warm, so cozy, wrapped up in my camp sweater, staring up at a darkening sky, squashed between Maddie and Siri. It was bittersweet. Summer would be ending soon, and it was my last year as a counselor. Come August, it was goodbye sticky s'mores and color wars, and hello adulthood. I caught Jude's gaze through the crackling campfire. Dark brown curls sticking from his counselor hat, lit up in the firelight, almost like his hair was on fire. Jude's smile was sad, somehow. Jude had been my summer fling since I was 15. I didn't like the idea of never seeing him again, though something in his eyes told me it was deeper than that. Lucy Lockhart confessed She was in love with a girl in her cabin. Harry Leaworth stood once we had stopped cheering. Do you guys know what's really funny? Well, do you remember the night of the color war? After we all went back to our cabins, I may have done something like really stupid. His voice faded in and out suddenly like ocean waves, a writhing pain prickling at the back of my skull. I did remember the night of the color war. I went to Jude's cabin, and it was empty. But my cabin wasn't. Siri was face down on her bed, a knife through her back. Maddie's body was lying in front of me, her head severed. I found Jude and the rest of the counselors in the woods, surrounded by flickering candlelight. Harry stood over their bodies, Jude's heart squeezed between his fists. I took a slow step back, but he was already in front of me, and his knife was already plunging into my skull. I kind of killed you. Harry's voice brought me back to the present, back to an uncomfortable silence. I killed all of us so summer wouldn't end. Oh, and it's okay. Summer will continue. His gaze flicked at Jude, and I remembered the cavernous hole in his chest. I made a deal with A, friend. Simon was the first to stand up shakily, and as reality was starting to hit me, delusion bleeding away, I could feel my brains dripping down the back of my neck. What the hell? Simon's yell cut off and the floor fell from underneath me. When I opened my eyes, I was jumping off the bus on the first day of camp. Jude was quick to greet me, but when his hands entangled with mine, I felt his fingernails dig in. I would never grow up, never go to college. Jude's smile was wide, his eyes hollow. He pulled me toward him, squeezing me in a hug that was a little too tight. When his lips found my ear, I could hear the strain in his voice, his rapid gasps for breath, begging for death. This is going to be the best summer ever.